All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. We're still waiting for one participant to catch the audio, but the intro is probably familiar. Welcome everybody to today's panel discussion here for ASBX 2021 on the US side. Incredibly excited to host today's session where we're discussing space tech and different approaches to new technologies, either traveling into space or analogs for space exploration. So I'm really excited. I do have a separate heart for engineering, so it is really something that I think will be incredible to listen to all of you. It is really my great honor to welcome all of our panelists today, and I will introduce them one by one and give them the chance to introduce themselves. I'm Chris Maynor. I'm Associate Professor for Biomedical Engineering at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. And I've been working in space biology and small tech, if you will, for the last 3 years. Specifically, I have a background in medicine and biochemistry. And I'm developing small hardware to test human cells in space. And this is really exciting to hear more of future opportunities and what's going to happen. For small housekeeping, as always, we'll ask everybody who's not speaking to mute their mics. And for the audience, so those that are not panelists, please use the chat. I'm happy to encourage our panelists to also answer in the chat if there's a question directed at them. The recent panels have shown that we usually don't get to all these questions, so please go ahead if there's something directly at you. I'm happy also to distribute the chat later by email if there's any resources in there. And with that, without further ado, I'll be starting our introductions. And it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Angeli Gupta. She is the business development lead and space life science for Axiom Space. It's really a huge honor to have you here. I'm really excited to see where Axiom is going, and I'm sure everybody else is too and wants to know more and all the details. She has extensive prior experience working for Roche, Vertex, and Pfizer, and is also a former NASA Space Biology Fellow, as I found out. So please, Angeli, please take the floor, introduce yourself and some of the vision and parts you want to share about space technology and Axiom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that wonderful introduction. And hello from San Diego. It's not as sunny here today. It's a little bit overcast, but still happy to be here. So as Christine mentioned, I currently work at Axiom Space in a business development role focused on life science markets. Really, it's not so much, there is business development, but it's really market creation. So what we're doing at Axiom is we're building the world's first commercial space station with a vision to build a thriving home for humanity in space. We envision people living and working in space. And for that, we need habitat. So really, we're a space technology company building large infrastructure. And then by way of a little bit of my background and how I got here, I started my career in pharmaceuticals, in drug discovery, specifically as an electrophysiologist. I was doing some very early stage drug discovery, target identification, target validation type work. And then over time, I transitioned into assay development and did some high throughput screening as I was working on small molecule and small molecule compounds for specific therapeutic areas. And then eventually moved into safety pharmacology. From pharma, I pivoted into biotech marketing and then into digital health. And then I eventually made my way into space biology. So as I find myself at this intersection of science and business and space, it's really exciting to bring, some of these traditional industries from pharmaceutical to biotech into this new world of space, because humans are going to be colonizing space off Earth, whether it's low Earth orbit or the moon or Mars. And so with respect to Axiom's vision, we are launching our first module in 2024. It is a modular space station. It'll be built out over 3 to 4 years. By 2028, we will have completed the station and it will become a free flyer. Part of that is building out a research and manufacturing facility on orbit. And in addition to creating new markets, I'm contributing to the design of our orbital lab. And it's just very exciting. And then the other thing I want to add is that I'm also very passionate about educating the next generation of the space workforce, whether it's in STEM or art or humanities. I think everything is important. It's not just about STEM, even though I come from a STEM background. I think that we're truly at an inflection point in humanities history with respect to the space phenomena, which truly is global. In just the past year, so many countries have announced a space program, especially emerging countries, which is really exciting to see. Space inspires all of us. It's awe-inspiring. And if I can help somebody get interested in space and help them find their way, I feel like I've made a difference. And I do a lot of this work through my role as the chair of the Education and Outreach Committee through the American Society for Gravitational and Space Research. And I just want to also point out that I did do a webinar for ASBX. If you want to check that out, I do go into a lot more depth about what Axiom is doing. It's more about a 15-minute webinar where you can take a look. And I yield the floor back to you, Chris.
Thank you so much. Again, it's really exciting to have you join us here. And, you know, we have heard this, you know, over the past couple of days too. It is about, you know, the education and bringing everybody together, but having this opportunity to do this on a global scale, I think, is what really gets us all excited. And so, yeah, no, it's really fantastic. Thank you. Well, moving on to Michael Marksbury, who is the CEO and co-founder of Auros. And I'm actually just going to yield the floor right to you and tell us yourself what that is and what that means.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Marksbury, the co-founder and CEO of Auros, as Chris said. My story is super simple. When I was in college, I backpacked across Europe. Climbed the tallest mountain in the Northeast Swiss Alps. Absolutely incredible experience. One really big problem. When I was on the mountain, I looked just like the Michelin Man, like tons of bulk and tons of layers. And the thing that didn't make sense to me was all these other industries were exploding. You know, space tourism was about to be a reality at that time and certainly is on its way today. We were using the CRISPR-Cas9 gene system to edit human genomes. All these things were happening in all these other industries. And I was standing on top of this mountain in a big bulky jacket that was insulated with animal byproducts or goose down, same stuff we've been using for hundreds, if not thousands of years to stay warm. So I thought that there had to be a better way to cut the bulk, cut the layers, and still stay warm. Came back to the US and was really fortunate while I was in college. I ended up getting a scholarship created by the Mercury 7 astronauts called the Astronaut Scholarship. And through that scholarship, I learned about this technology that NASA was using to insulate spacecraft like the Mars rovers in the really cold temperatures of space called Aerogel. NASA said Aerogel, lowest thermal conductive solid in existence. And so the light bulb goes off in my head and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is the perfect solution for this problem that I had, where I looked like the Michelin Man on top of this mountain, right? Like lowest thermal conductive solid, you're using it to insulate Mars rovers in space where it's, you know, like close to absolute zero. How come we're not using this ubiquitously in all insulated consumer products? And then I got my first sample of aerogel and learned immediately why we weren't using this stuff ubiquitously in all consumer products. Turned out aerogel was super brittle. Poke it, shatters into 1,000 little pieces. Really bad news bears for pretty much any application that you want to use it in. So my co-founder, Rith, and I became maniacally obsessed with this problem. How do you take the best insulation in the universe and just make it flexible and durable enough so you can use it in things like apparel? And we were really lucky. By our senior years of college, we ended up creating the first ever flexible, durable aerogel composite in the world called Solar Core, received some patents on it. And then once we made Solar Core, we created an incredible brand called Auros, where all of our apparel is insulated with Solar Core. We create the warmest gear without any of the bulk. Really fortunate to have raised a good amount of venture capital from some really great VCs. Brand's doubled every year from a revenue perspective, and we have a really incredible team here in Portland, Oregon. I'm super excited about the growth that's in front of us. I think the last thing I'd say is, you know, when Rith and I started Oros, our goal was super simple. We didn't just want to make thinner or warmer outerwear like we make today. We wanted to completely transform this antiquated category of insulated apparel. We wanted to make a long sleeve shirt that could keep our consumer warm sub-freezing. So not just shove something inside of a jacket, but create a really warm fiber, the warmest fiber that's ever existed, that you can then spin up into a shirt that can keep you warm sub-freezing. And we didn't really think it was possible. If you remember, like, aerogel is super brittle. It's like you can't really put that aerogel on a fiber in any meaningful capacity, or else the fiber becomes brittle, all that stuff. And then everything changed in 2016. 2016, NASA created a whole new class of aerogel materials, a polymer-based aerogel, unlike the original aerogel, polymer aerogel, super flexible, super durable. So perfect candidate to power this fiber that can keep you warm sub-freezing. So we, along with our R&D partners, got exclusive licenses on this class of aerogel materials, which is super cool, and spent the last couple of years building this incredible fiber tech that can keep you warm sub-freezing. Right at the beginning of COVID, created our first fiber sample, brought it into the board meeting. Board was blown away. Everyone's super excited. And now we're in the process of commercializing it and producing it on a mass scale here in the United States for eventual launch into the consumer market in fall of 22. So I'm really excited. Alongside that, we partner with the Department of Defense on a variety of different applications relative to thermal performance. And at the end of the day, Oros is a materials technology company unlocking human exploration. And the way we do that is by creating the most scientifically advanced thermal materials on the planet. So that's me, that's Oros, that's what we're up to, and super excited to be here. And Chris, thanks for having me.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much for this really great introduction. Like, you know, so many things come to mind, because I know that your main focus of insulating humans, but I mean, you know, you can insulate anything, I'm assuming. So yeah, I'll send you an email. I need an installation for something. So that's great. That's really fantastic. Okay. Well, moving on to Jawad Al-Hussein, who is joining us from Canada today. He is an entrepreneur and chief technology officer at Stardust Technologies, and Stardust specializes in AI, XR robotics, and STEM education. Jawad, thank you so much for joining us today, and please tell us more about you and your background and your future.
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, Chris, my name is Jawad Al-Hussein, and I'm the chief technology officer at Stardust. So basically, Stardust is a Canadian tech company developing XR solution for several industries here, such as mining and medical industries. So when I say mining industries, it's about the safety. So we are developing solution in virtual reality, augmented reality, to help miners during their jobs, during their duty under the ground. So it's really helpful for that. Then about myself, I'm graduated as software engineer in IT computer science at the Université de Franche-Comté in France. I'm actually French living in Canada. And before jumping to the space industry, I worked a while in the entertainment industry, such as video game developer for Tencent in China, Disney America, etc. So I've got the opportunity to work in the fashion industry, and I designed Sarah Reka, an AI virtual model, and she's among the 10 best virtual influencers in the world, according to Forbes magazine in 2020. So Stardust and I are quite new in the aerospace industry, and we are trying to make our own solution with the hidden projects that we are working in collaboration with the Canadian Space Agency and the National Research Council of Canada here. And I will explain a little bit more just after. Back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really fantastic. Next, we have Kyle, and Kyle is a PhD candidate. Kyle Morgenstein, I'm sorry, is a PhD candidate from at UT Austin, and he also is continuously working at NASA JPL. And as far as I could learn, he is working on AI ethics and whole body control for legged robots in the human-centered robotics group. So also very exciting to have you on board here, and please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. Very happy to be here. I'll share my screen for a moment. Some slides to present. All right, cool. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. So hi, thank you for the introduction. My name is Kyle Morgenstein. I'm a roboticist and astrobiologist, and we'll talk a bit about what that means in a moment. My background is primarily in aerospace engineering and geology, and I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Texas at Austin, thinking about robotics and space exploration and how we can use robotics sort of as a full force multiplier as we go and set up bases on the moon and Mars and outwards in our solar system. But to start with a little bit of motivation, I started this line of research thinking about the search for life in the solar system, thinking about where life comes from, where it comes from here on Earth, and how we can find it elsewhere. So here on the left and also behind me, we see actually an Australian microbial community. My research, even though I'm not in Australia right now, is pretty heavily centered in Australia. And these are cyanobacteria. They are some of the most ancient organisms in the world. We think they're responsible for developing photosynthesis and oxygenating the atmosphere and the ocean. And they are, because they're photosynthesizers, they need the sun to grow. And so when they're in these shallow marine conditions, water and sand wash over them, the bacteria want to climb up to be back in the sunlight, and so they compact the sand in around them. That's what we see on the right there, these very characteristic structures called stromatolites that these bacteria form. And so my research questions thought about what are the conditions required to preserve these organisms, because we see them in the rock record, in the fossil record here on Earth. And we see them primarily in silica deposits, hydrated silica deposits. And so from basic experimentation in our lab, we were able to find that these bacteria are able to play an active role in their preservation. They pull silica out of the water and form these capsules around themselves, which are then preserved. So the cell itself is decomposed. It doesn't get preserved as a fossil. There's no bony parts, but this silica shell that it forms is preserved. That's the fossil that we find. And if we look at the large scale community and also do the same sort of experiment, we find that the silica is not able to penetrate inside of these fibers that these cells create. They only stick on the outside. So we see the preservation of these sort of larger scale structures. And by large scale, I still mean nanometer scale to micrometer scale, but not individual cells. We are seeing the whole community preserved. And so we care about this because when we send rovers and robots to places like Mars, for example, Jezero Crater, we see these exact same kind of conditions. We see these water environments. We've got an inlet and an outlet river here on Jezero Crater, where the Perseverance rover was just sent. And we see hydrated silica deposits and carbonates the same way we see on Earth. And so this sort of geology background helps inform what are we looking for when we go to places like Mars or go to places like Europa or Enceladus, moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And so some of the robots that I get to work with now tackle problems like the locomotion required to explore these environments. We know that on Europa, Saturn's moon that we think has a liquid water ocean, there's these geysers that spray water out into space. We've seen this with our satellites. And so if we wanted to design a robot, what would be the most effective design to travel down these geysers to get to this ocean? Right now, NASA JPL is working on a concept called the EELS robot on the right, which is a snake-like robot that's able to snake its way down through these geysers into this ocean. Other problems we tackle is in low gravity. You can't use your legs to balance yourself because you spend so much time in the air. So like a skydiver swinging their arms and hips around to change their momentum, how can robots learn these same tasks to travel these sorts of extreme environments? And so I like to think about how can robots be effective tools for astronauts, and also how can robots help us explore environments that may be impossible for astronauts to get into. So there's a lot of really exciting work going on that I'm excited to talk about and can't wait to hear from everyone else on the panel as well. So thank you.
Thank you. That's really brilliant and really raises a lot of, thought and like provokes the thought of having all these different abilities that robots could have. And as you said, it's a lot harder for a human to kind of just morph into some other shape. That's very fantastic. Excellent work. Very exciting. Last but certainly not least, I would like to introduce Jewell, who is a physician and space medicine scientist. She's also the CEO and co-founder of MARS, the Mars Moon Astronautics Academy and Research Sciences. and is a present and former analog astronaut, and certainly I'm assuming an entrepreneur at heart. So very pleased to have you here. Please go ahead, share your screen and introduce yourself and all your projects.
Thank you so much, Christine, for having me here. And so I'm going to quickly share my slides and just let me know if you can see it, and try to rush through it as fast as I can. So thank you. Yes, let me also go the slideshow from beginning. All right, so Mars, as Chris had mentioned, is I'm the CEO, and we've been deploying analog astronaut crew training missions since 2015 in what we call ICE, isolated confined environments, and here in Mojave Desert where we have our training facility. But our main goal is really to train the next generations, space leaders, and also civilian analog astronauts. And because my passion is in medicine, the future of space medics. And so really, we've been working in a lot of novel exponential technologies, developing capabilities to support future astronauts living in space and on a planetary surface. So this is sort of a high-level overview of that vision, right? Like, for example, and we work in many other areas, but because this is Space Health and Medicine Conference, we're just going to focus on this particular sector. So the concept is, how do you bring in all these different types of technology in this particular caveat to rescue an injured astronaut? And injuries will be very high risk, and we will be predisposed to actually acquiring the knowledge using technologies to be able to rescue, but not only for critical injuries in space, but also how do you maintain the health and wellness of the crews that eventually will live in space permanently, right? So here we're using all these technology and working and developing and R&D, research and development in these different technologies. So one of the programs we started in 2016 was the Space Medics program. Basically, it's analogous to becoming a paramedic, becoming a doctor here on Earth, and how do you train to do that? And then incorporating very cutting edge novel frontier technologies. So when they come through this program, they do search and rescue with all the different technologies that we're working on. They do evacuation, medical triage, and so on and so forth. And we've also developed our training program, High Fidelity. So here you can see we are the only organization actually went up to Nepal. We went to 15,000 feet. We're going to Everest and then Antarctica in 2023. And really looking at, can these capabilities literally work? The feasibility and the viability of these technologies, because you can come up with all these technologies, but if you don't really test them in these really extreme environments, and in our case, we really had challenges with the technologies. They didn't work, they froze, but, or it was in the desert here, 120 degrees, they like melted. So these are, and also how do these individuals learn how to use the technologies? So the user experience is critically important. That's why it's part of these analog astronaut training missions. I think it's really an amazing setup for us to be able to train future astronauts. And I'm talking about, non-professionals. I'm talking about civilian astronauts, which is just opened up in the last 3 months. The possibility of anyone that wants to go to space and live in space, work in space, is manifesting. So for me, I'm also the CEO of Avatar Medic. And in this company, we really worked on how do we develop a humanoid tele-avatar, telepresence robot that, using the convergence of different technologies like spatial computing, which is, in this case, I'm going to say it's HoloLens 2, bringing in haptics, and then the robotics, and somebody coming in thousands of miles away. In this case, you could see we built this prototype space clinic, right, in our simulation. And then these are non-medical crews, and they're working with robotic arm. This is all 3D printed. Somebody's wearing a spatial computing headset about 300 miles away in Las Vegas, and training, using telementoring as well, the non-medical crew, how to do tele-anesthesia and basic telesurgery protocols. So this is the paradigm of the future of how we're going to be able to do medicine in space. And then here we also worked, and this is one of our projects we're working on, called the Medinaut, and also a humanoid robotic doctor. This is what I just said. They're wearing a HoloLens, you know, haptics coming in, you know, remotely. But the MediNaut is the next phase where you're going to have literally the flying rover drone Da Vinci surgeon doctor, right? That's where we're heading towards and developing. So yes, it is hard because it's really about the secret sauce is how do you get all these technologies that you're putting together and converging together to be able to work together, right? So with that, I'm going to show you a few of our concept videos. Let me just go quickly through the slides, and then you can get an idea of what we're doing. So this is actually a prototype testing of our MediNaut, where we developed a solar-powered glider. We put in our drone on top, and then you could see here we were testing it out because it's just, you know, the idea of rapid prototyping is that it was able to fly pretty high altitude, and it was able to stay in the air, you know, for about 10-15 minutes. And the idea is that when it lands, it will be able to go to the injury site and be able to, you know, perform very basic medical surgical intervention. I'll show you the concept video in a minute. As well, we've been working on many other innovative technologies. Now, these are novel frontier technologies. Here's some examples when you come into the training. We're working on, these are all 3D printed. A 3D printed papier, this was last year because of COVID, where we're able to 3D print this power air purifying respirator. And this is actually the inventor. He's an anesthesiologist. He's actually wearing this early prototype in a surgical room, right, with a real patient which had diagnosed with COVID. So this was really amazing because he wore this for nearly, you know, 18 hours. And so this is something we're bringing into our training R&D track. And the solar powered 3D printer, this is something we developed in 2015. And we brought it up to Nepal, high altitude in the desert, and we were able to 3D print multiple medical devices. Here you could see medical tools, and here is the vapor jet, which is the first of its kind. This is going to change the way that we are going to perform surgery in space, because if you can 3D print this device, vapor jet is the anesthesia inhalation device. So now you can put a person to sleep, and then you can perform the surgery, right? And so this actually was 3D printed in 2015 on the International Space Station. So now we've developed the protocol and training the analog crews. And in this case, these were all space medicine doctors. And in our mission, and being able to use the device, print it out, and actually, you know, follow the protocol. How do you intubate? How do you put a person to sleep, and then be able to do the surgery that is needed? So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this and quickly, if I can, share my my videos so that you could see, at least in action, the concept of what we're trying to do. So with that, I will share this. If you give me a second, I know it takes a while with Zoom because we have to do all this clicking. Where is it? Okay, here it is. All right. So this actually is the use of the avatar robot concept. And now this robot is interacting in real time with a surgeon coming remotely in this robot, you know, in this robot, and doing a simple neurological exam.
Hi Dorian, so nice to meet you. So I'm Dr. Dewberry and I'm here to take the neurology exam. I just need you to relax and just follow my instructions, okay? The first thing I need you to do is to keep looking directly at my eyes and then follow my instructions. So this is the pen light and I'm going to shine it into your eyes now. Okay, keep looking at me. That's great. That's right. Good. Now I'm going to shine the light in the other eye, but keep just looking directly at my eyes. Right? Okay.
So you can see that was a very simple, you know, concept of what we're trying to build with the humanoid telerobotic surgeon doctor. I'm going to show you now the MediNaut, and this is only like less than a minute, so let me go to it. And this is the MediNaut concept of what we're developing now. And so let me do this again because, okay, wonderful. Right, I think it's this one. Okay, so this is the Medinaut concept that we are prototyping now.
Avatar Medic, Medinaut Drone, the Flying Da Vinci. Avatar Medic Medinaut Drone will enable on-site medical providers and first responders to have access to next-generation life-saving interventions and training. Moreover, using the power of telementoring, the Avatar Medic drone can instruct and support non-medical persons to render accurate life-saving aid. Medinaut is capable of locating injured persons in remote environments, landing near, moving toward, and providing data stream of injured person's status. The Medinaut is controlled via mixed mode of direct operation and autonomous pathfinding. Wheels with motors within and four-wheel steering ability enable ground mobility. The drone features two snake-armed articulating end effectors for grabbing and precise cutting and suturing. The end effectors are designed to enable wide pressure for bleeding control and patient assessment, along with retractable laparoscopic end effectors, opening the possibility of suturing and basic surgical interventions. Modular storage bays, modular splint backboard system, and other medical intervention technologies enable the Avatar Medic drone to render effective aid in remote and austere environments.
So thank you so much. We can talk more, and thank you, Christine.
Thank you very much. This is really fantastic work, and I think we can all see, you know, that it doesn't take a lot to envision how do these inventions and these, you know, these moves forward in technology also benefit and can benefit humans on Earth, which is always, you know, also something that we can keep in mind, and that's obviously really important. Really great to have everybody's introductions here. This is really fantastic. I'm super excited to dive into some of our discussion points here, and I'm going to start with Angeli, and you know, I really would like to know, in terms of technology and automation, how much is that an emphasis, especially if we're taking that step into life sciences and biology for a second, about the development of the Axiom Lab and those kind of components. How much of a challenge is the automation at this point, and where do you see that going? And like, you know, which fields do you think are going to improve most in the upcoming years in the development phase?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I'm going to provide you an answer from a life sciences perspective. Automation is definitely, you know, an important component of developing the space station. As we can see today, some of the barriers to sending payloads is crew time. Once even the payloads are up on orbit, there's not enough hands, not enough crew time to be able to do some of the complex experiments. But as we start to develop these technologies, it's not just about automation, it's about, you know, packing in some very complex technology, some very complex science into something that's small, so that the footprint, the mass is much smaller, much lighter, more rugged. So it's that whole idea of designing for spaceflight. And part of that is automation. So one thing that I've, you know, been pitching to listeners is, you know, when you take an experiment, a terrestrial experiment, you need to translate into something orbital. And then taking that orbital experiment, translating it into something that's automated. And then that automation is then scalable, because really our focus is manufacturing. Ultimately, as we're starting to create these new markets and these new businesses in space, it's really about large scale manufacturing in space, and that process needs to be automated. That's not to say that there is no place for manual human interaction research. There's definitely an element of that, but most likely early on, automation is what's going to drive some of the adoption and new insights in space. So I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, no, it's perfect though. Just as a super brief follow-up, is the manufacturing, at least at the moment, is that mostly targeted at survival and living in space, or mostly to gain, at least, essentially products to bring back on Earth and benefit humans here?
Well, I mean, we're definitely taking a bidirectional approach, especially since there is interest from various governments to go back to the moon, go forward to Mars. But right now, our market is on the ground. So I would say, wherever we can see opportunities for that bidirectional approach, that's definitely the ideal. But there is also quite a bit of focus for that market on the ground, which really is going to drive some of those early, the early market creation in the low Earth orbit economy.
Thank you. I want to ask Jawad a question, and it's actually hinging on Susan's presentation and her background also. My question is, using XR or virtual reality, how much is it possible to use, kind of also what Angeli was just pointing out, the attempt of miniaturization and automation, and kind of include that into a simulation and assess easier, okay, what's the point of failure, etc. Is that something that seems to be on the horizon, or is that just me having, utopic dreams?
So firstly, if you allow me, Chris, I would like to make a quick introduction about the Eden project, because I believe it could answer your question. So the Eden project is basically an experience allowing astronauts to help them cope against confinement in space through medical activities and entertainment. With the Eden project, we are using several technologies such as virtual reality, augmented reality, and of course, haptic feedback to measure and evaluate astronaut level of stress in order to generate exercise by our AI that allows them, of course, to reduce their own stress. NASA and other space agencies, like the European Space Agencies around the world, are measuring the negative impact that long-term installation has on their psychological level of astronauts. And just like Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychoanalysis, did for soldiers during the First World War, we wish to trick the brain through our experience. Just to explain you a bit, Dr. Freud had conducted several psychoanalytic exercises to treat soldiers who suffered from several trauma from the horror of war. By tricking the human brain, his success in reducing the stress of the soldiers until they were completely cured and without eating any medication. For him, unconsciousness is the key to curing all psychological illness. With Eden project, we trap the human brain by using virtual reality and of course the haptic feedback combination. We are generating terrestrial environments such as forest on design and add sensation of weather such as wind, rain, thanks to the haptic technology. For the technical part, we are using a modified virtual reality set. This is the Oculus Quest. By the way, this is what they are using in the International Space Station. And we are sending the image to the brain and haptic suits to send those sensations. And the suits is measuring heart activity in real time. We also measure the amount of oxygen in the blood to detect any hyperventilation due to stress. And the AI adapts the exercise to the astronaut to give them the content adapted to their needs. All data is sent in real time to the Earth, allowing the medical teams to follow the session. Beyond the medical aspect, and like I am explaining in my video in your upload channel, Eden allows you to escape by playing ludic games, allowing to view real content such as a video with your family in total virtual reality. And you can also feel a hug with your family on Earth, again, thanks to the haptic feedback technology. So the research and development done on Eden will also be used for an earthly version to help certain populations who suffer from isolation, as we can see in Nunavut here in Canada. So I don't know if I reply a bit of your question, Chris, but hopefully I give you more, some details.
No, it's really fantastic, and it's answering some of the, or it's touching some parts that actually came up in previous panel discussions too, like the entirety of human behavior and how, yeah, the isolation and confinement really changes, and you know, having the ability to go into a simulation and experience a hug or from somebody who hasn't been with you on station for months is probably quite a nice sensation for people. So that's really fantastic. Certainly something I learned today. That's fantastic. I want to move on to Michael real quick here. I'm interested, and I hope you didn't mention this earlier, but how challenging is it going to be to pair SoulCore with other components, let's say for spacesuits, etc., that are necessary for radiation protection and other like very specific environmental situations depending on where a mission is going to? Is there any knowledge on that or something you can share?
It's a phenomenal question. I think I mentioned one of our partners is the United States Department of Defense. We're working on a variety of different applications. Some of those applications involve combining our technology with other technologies for, say, radiation protection, or some other qualities that I believe can be utilized to a great degree in space. So the process is ongoing. I think it's easier with the next generation technology, the fiber, compared to our current technology, which is more of a composite with aerogel. But I believe there's incredible opportunity there, an incredible opportunity to utilize this technology in a variety of different space applications.
So I was obviously, kind of saying this jokingly, even though I made it, dead serious earlier, that while not necessarily just as a to wear, but there's obviously a lot of opportunity, as you just said, to use this as a insulation, shield for other parts. So kind of, if you hear, Angeli talking about life sciences and ideally mass production of human biologicals, which I'm assuming are going to include cells, human cells that ideally need 37 degrees permanent. Does that, kind of raise your heart rate? Is that something where you think, okay, this, to lower, because we all need to work with energy budgets, etc., right? We can't just, plug something into an imaginary plug in space. So what do you think about that?
100%. I think if thermal maintenance is something that's really important, you would definitely want to combine with the material. I get really intrigued by phase change materials if that's the end goal. But if, so in that case, you would definitely want to do a combination with our technology. If the goal is anything relating to pure thermal performance, whether it's thermal management or otherwise, I think we could utilize our technology alone, but definitely in combination. And there's a variety of things that I think we can use to get the end result, whether it's, to your point, thermal maintenance of a temperature or pure thermal performance from an insulation perspective, or say more signature management or radiation in space. There are tons of different applications and several which we're working on and I'm super excited about.
Angeli, you had a comment. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I wanted to make a quick comment. Have you, perhaps you've already thought about this, but maybe some sort of a wearable that also doubles up as, a pouch for cells? Because especially during rocket launch, there aren't powered lockers or utilities or enough of them. So that is that's a very limited resource. But if you could just put on this jacket on the inside, you can, mount a bunch of pouches of cells or bags filled with cells. Sometimes all you need is just the ambient temperature slightly higher. Could that be, could you control it that way? So just putting it out there as an idea.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal idea. That is not something we're working on today, but that makes an incredible amount of sense. Yeah, let's talk afterwards. This is awesome.
Sure.
Thank you.
And it's very much in theme with Australia, if I may say. It sounds very much like a kangaroo approach. So
there you go, marsupials right there.
Exactly. That's fantastic. Yeah. I was always watching especially manned spaceflight, where then, science that's sent is even more limited or usually not on board at all. Like this would increase the ability to bring science into orbit. That's definitely an incredible idea, yeah. Kyle, I'm gonna throw this one on you. Where do you see, so I know you're working, mostly with larger robots, I'm assuming, and kind of applications for like larger, I guess exploration even. But if we kind of go back to the miniaturization and automation, what's your, you're very much in this field, where do you see this kind of going? And if we're saying maybe for the moment a little bit more in Leo with the group we have here, what do you think the field is going to go to?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in after Dr. Gupta's question, because I think they're very related. And my answer is sort of regardless of scale. In the past, we've attempted to send robots into orbit for a lot of these automation tasks. There was a robot called Robonaut and Robonaut 2 that was sent to the International Space Station. And the astronauts hated it. I don't think that they've publicly said as much, but they did not like it. It was a really cool concept that NASA funded, really, really cool robot, but it didn't work. In orbit, it required a huge amount of crew hours and labor, and it had to get sent back down to Earth for repairs, then sent back up into space again. And it just never fulfilled the promises of automation that it was told to the astronauts that it would help make their lives easier. And it didn't. And part of it is because robotics as a field is still fairly young. If you imagine computing in the 1970s, you had to know every level of your computer system, the memory management and how the processor talked and the kernel. And now using languages like Python, anyone can sit down and in a few hours learn how to code. And so robotics is going through the same sort of transition where in order to be truly useful, we need a robot that we can power on and use. And it serves its purpose and it does so repetitively well. And debugging it is fairly simple and straightforward. You don't have to take the entire robot apart and reattach a leg in space like they were trying to do. And so whether it be miniaturization or larger robots for exploration, or even assembly robots that could construct an entire lunar base, at all of these scales, we come back to the same sort of problems in that right now, robotics aren't robust enough and require too much human effort and tuning to make work, that to achieve the kinds of promises that Dr. Gupta talked about, we require a greater degree of robustness than we currently are seeing. We require a greater degree of sort of off the shelf, you put the robot down and it just works. One of the concepts that my lab has worked a lot with is using robotics with magnetic feet. And the application here on Earth is things like radio tower repair. The robot can climb up to the top, it can observe problems, diagnose them, and oftentimes fix them. But if your robot every now and then loses a leg or falls off, something like that, you never put that on a radio tower. And so same idea with a space station. If you want to be able to make repairs or check your solar panels and do those sorts of tasks, it would be great to have a robot with magnetic feet on the outside of your space station. But if you have to perform an EVA every week to go and repair it, that's no good. That's not actually helping your astronaut. And so I think a lot of the promises, to circle back to your question, that these robots can pose and in general automation can pose, really requires sort of a next step in being able to plug and play, to turn it on the same way that if you turn on a new iPhone, you can transfer all your contacts very easily. But if you wanted to do that with an older flip phone, you'd have to do it manually or transfer an SD card. It's not at all as simple. And that's sort of the transition that we're hoping to see happen in robotics in the next 5 to 10 years. It's not quite there yet, but that's where we're headed.
So essentially, thanks for that insight, because essentially what you're saying, we're likely going to see both human exploration into deep space evolve pretty much at the same time as robotics, right? Like that kind of seems to be a similar timeline there. Which is both, exciting, but also kind of a shame, because it would be nicer to send the robots first and not expose humans to the dangers of deep space without exactly knowing.
Yeah, and there have been robotic systems that we send, the Mars rovers, we've sent probes to various planets, and we are able to do these things. But the problem is that these systems take 10 years and billions of dollars. The Perseverance rover is a $3 billion rover. And what you want to be able to do is the same thing that we see now in CubeSats, where you can build one for $100,000, $200,000. My senior capstone class in undergrad, we built a CubeSat that's being launched. It's much easier now to engage with that kind of technology, and we haven't seen the same thing happen with robots. And so when we see that, we'll be able to send them much deeper into the solar system at much lower cost and with much greater numbers. But currently you'll see big expensive one-off programs sending 1 or 2 very expensive robots. but in the same time in development, as we send humans to places like the moon and Mars, robots that accompany them that help make the humans' lives easier, you're going to see sort of those technological paths evolve in parallel. Is at least what we're seeing from the technical perspective.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that. Susan, I want to kind of play a little bit devil's advocate here and put you a tiny bit on the spot, actually. So very excited to see, you know, the Avatar Medic and all the different, you know, hands-off remote medical applications that you and your team are developing. It's really fantastic, and there's so many applications for that. How do you address the worry that you know, maybe there still needs to be a human on the other side, and the further we get away from LEO, that data connection and just purely the distance is going to limit the actual communication? What are your thoughts on that? How, you know, if this was on the moon or further towards Mars, how will they work? Will these be like pre-programmed programs essentially, and they can be then kind of booted up by whichever astronaut is there, and then they're played, or what's the thought?
Yeah, that's a really great question. But, you know, I'm going to answer that by saying that any new idea that's going to revolutionize or a new paradigm, there's always going to be a starting point, right? And there will be huge challenges. You know, when we're looking at our cell phone now, 50 odd years ago, you know, as a kid, I would never thought I'd be holding a cell phone, let alone I'm talking to people here in Zoom real time. And now we have the metaverse, right? The whole idea of the metaverse is where we can come in remotely, anywhere, anytime, and interact, even though this early stage is as avatars, or what we call telepresence. One day it will get to a point where the technology, and it's exponential, so it's going to be rapid, right? An increase in that technology, where it will be like you're there. So I'm going to say, you know, science fiction, Star Trek, we all know, right? The holodeck is manifesting, right? And so with your question, we're here at this early stage of this. It's called, you know, it's innovation and working through the challenges. But if we always say, well, you know, these are challenges that we can't overcome, we won't progress, but we will, because that's innate part of who we are. So I think that, yes, there's latency issues when we're talking about teleporting people, you know, I'm talking about spatial computing, the HoloLens. I'm not talking about augmented reality, talking about XR. That's the future of now, which actually will be able to teleport people, right, into in an immersive world, but you're there in real time as a telepresence avatar. So you're really there with the people that are there, whether it's astronauts, the space doctors that are in the spacecraft or on the planetary surface or here on Earth, right? In a remote area, because everything we do has to have applications on Earth to improve life on Earth. I think that's the ultimate connection. So to answer your question, at this point, yes, there's huge challenges, but we're at the point where I think it's a really interesting time, right? Where humans and the capabilities of the technology, you know, with spatial computing, with robots that are integrated with the haptics and so on and so forth, it's going there, and it will get so to the point where you wouldn't be able to differentiate the immersive, virtual immersive environment and the real environment that you're in, because the technology is so, we can call it the singularity or whatever you want to call it, you won't be able to differentiate the two environments. That's where sophistication will be with the technology. So yes, we will be able to eventually, if we overcome the latency. In fact, I think China and some organizations, other countries are working on 6G, 7G that we don't hear about because it's not in, you know, in the commercial sector right now. It's in the research arena. So the latency issue will be tackled, and we'll overcome it. And just like, you know, the metaverse that we're talking about now, which I was working 20 years ago in the clinic, I had a real clinic, we brought in tele avatars on the second line. So that's giving you an example in a way to answer your question. We will get there, and the capabilities that we're developing now will allow us to teleport, that's the word I'm going to use, real people remotely, millions of miles away eventually, to be able to interact with real people on wherever that environment is, right? And work together. That's the fascinating and really exciting time that we're in. Who would have thought, that Star Trek, the storytelling and those kind of, imagination, it's manifesting. And yes, within the next 10, 20 years, we will have permanence back on the moon and on our way to Mars. So
I knew I could ask you this question because I figured that you are a great visionary in this. So it's really fantastic to see, I think everybody on this panel really has this vision for what are the boundaries and how we can just overcome these, because these are just lines. They're drawn, but that doesn't mean that we can't step over these. So thank you so much for that, and for taking my really not so serious question and really helping us to find that enthusiasm for those future challenges. Angeli, I think you had another comment here.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. So, I completely agree with everything you're saying, Susan, and this is to all the other panelists as well. I know this might sound like a silly question, but when you're thinking about cybernetic life forms, essentially Cylons from Battlestar Galactica, really, what's your fear? Maybe that's 50 years away, maybe 100 years away, but that's something that we may still need to think about as we're developing these robotics and these life forms. I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are.
That's a very interesting question. I'm not into cybernetics. That's not what I'm doing, and what my drive or passion is when I'm involving robotics, haptics, all these technologies. I want to always in the loop, have humans in the loop of the equation, right? So it's not about cybernetics and these robot humans. No, it's actually a human being able to utilize these technology and be able to interact, with real people, right? But it's the technology that's supporting. In other words, it's enhancing our humanness, right? So that's what I'm interested. That's what I want to be able to work on and be able to build those technology and the support platform for that. It's never ever about removing the humanness of us in this arena. So hopefully that's my response to that question. And yes, with everything with technology like AI, there's always going to be the moral, ethical issue. And who's going to govern? Where are the rules? And that's something we need to talk about.
That's actually something we'll be discussing tomorrow in the panel. Sorry, not tomorrow, later today. I'm all scrambled with my timeline. In an hour from now, we'll be touching exactly on that, because it is a huge challenge, like who's going to govern and who's going to regulate. Kyle, you also had a thought on this.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here because this is a line of research that my lab is participating in as well. I wouldn't call it cybernetics quite yet, but the idea, at least for now, is that we have humans that all have a different sorts of sensors on them, EEG sensors, and robots that are working with them on some team application, whether it's building a structure or exploring an environment. And the humans need to know what the robot knows and vice versa. And you can use things like AR to provide data to each other. But a big part of the line of research we're thinking about is the robots need to know whether the humans trust the robot in the task that they're doing, or and vice versa. And so a big part of the problem here, and one of the technological developments that's sort of stopping us here, is how do you measure trust in terms of whether a human physically trusts the robot? You can ask the person as sort of like, oh, over the last 5 minutes, did the robot do what you expected it to do? But in terms of split-second decision-making, the way you might see if you were doing some high-risk maneuver in space, that's much, much harder to measure. And we're trying to do a bunch of different approaches, reading the EEG signals, et cetera. But even once we have that information, how do we know that the signal that we've taken out of the human brain is actually trust? How is that the emotion that we've determined it to mean? And how does that mean the robot should behave in according to it? Because the thing we're really trying to do here is minimize the difference between what the human expects the robot to do and what it does do. in a way that feels very normal in human environments of various small social cues you can pick up, whether you've done something not correct because a person will maybe make a jolty behavior, things that we pick up on very naturally, but the robots have a lot of difficulty doing so. And when we talk about these ethical and moral questions, how do we even recognize from the robot's perspective that it's made a mistake? It's not a simple task as like, I put the block in the wrong hole. It's something like I didn't do the right thing and the human expected something different. Even if the action may have been correct, that's the level of moral intuition that we just don't quite have yet, but it's a very active area of research, and I'm very excited to see how that develops and evolves as well.
That is really incredible. And yeah, as Susan also mentioned, it is the basis of what we know as sci-fi, and yet it's really is coming to reality. I think it's really fantastic. We are actually at the end of our hour. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. One more. You're welcome.
I just want to quickly, I just want to throw this out for those who are listening, and maybe it's something in an area that we really need to work on is, emotional intelligence or authentic intelligence, not artificial, because you say artificial, authentic. So how do we develop authentic intelligence in the robots? Now, think about it, right? Everything, as we keep moving forward and we use our cell phone, our communication devices as a great analogy, is that it gets miniaturized and miniaturized over time and smaller and smaller. Even now, there are nanorobots, right, that are under research that can go inside our body. So I would say, being a visionary, 20, 30 years in the future, and having done molecular medicine, is eventually the robots will be inside our body. It will be incorporated into our DNA. Would that then call us cyber robots? Are we enhanced humans? Those are questions I just want to throw out there to the audience to think about.
Yeah.
And they're important questions too.
They're very important. Yeah. Angeli, go ahead.
Angeli, I just wanted to make one more comment based on what this discussion is that we haven't really talked about synthetic biology. As we start to explore new planets and, even deep space, there's no way we can take all of the materials with us. So the in situ resource utilization, relying on bacteria or just, synthetic biology processes to extract and transform those materials. So all of this all ties into, the miniaturization and those nanobots, and applying those nanobots, whether they're inside or on the ground transforming. This is all part of our future. And I just want to make a plug for this book, Arthur C. Clarke. I don't know if you can see it. It's Profiles of the Future. It sits on my desk, and every time I look at, his table of what he has predicted, it's just so spot on, and it's just it completely baffles me. So I think that we're in a very exciting time in our lifetime.
I couldn't have found a better closing for this really incredible panel. I really appreciate you sharing that, and I fully agree. I think we can all agree that it is really exciting. The future is just up and out, and it's really fantastic. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for making the time today. I know this hour flew by super quick. I encourage everybody who's viewing and all the other panelists also to look out on the YouTube channel for this recording, but also for the pre-recordings that most of our panelists have submitted. It is very, very exciting. It was fantastic to meet all of you and to speak with all of you. And I'm certainly inspired, and there's so many more things that I'm gonna go and look up right now after talking to all of you. Again, thank you very much, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Have a great night.